All right. Well, we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. This is the April meeting of the Water Policy Committee, and we will start with approval of the minutes. Does anybody have any changes to the minutes for March?
I don't.
Nope, none for me.
Okay, then those will stand approved as written. And then we'll move forward to the consent items. Does anyone have any questions about the consent items?
No.
Um,
Well, actually,
Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead, please, Councilmember Bergan.
on the water supply, there's a chart on drought. I have to pull it up. We pull it up here, and I was just wondering, because it looks kind of odd, the way the drought map shows, like right above us is drought and below us is drought and West Coast. How I mean, is that determined? Well, I see it is valid April 1 to June 30th. So they're just predicting that.
Yes, I'm pulling that up. I thought for a second, I thought John Murphy was in the room, but he's
Oh,
not.
I guess he's not.
online.
I'm here. Sorry. Yes, that's correct. You can see the brown indicates that they expect the drought to persist, and the yellow is they expect it to develop. And so I can get, while we're on here, an updated, well, they may not have updated that yet, but let me see if they have.
Yeah, I thought it was weird, like California is hardly, I mean, only some of it is drought.
And
It's the same report, so they haven't updated that. That's the most recent one we have.
Recent, okay.
California's been getting a lot of rain and a lot of snow.
Oh,
So I'm not surprised to see them not in
Not
drought
in
in
it.
the upper
Okay.
part of the state.
okay. That was it.
All right. Well, yeah, it looks like we're doing pretty well, both drought-wise and water supply-wise compared to some of the years. So, all right. Any other questions on consent items?
None.
None.
Okay, then we will go ahead and move forward to the 2025 Central Colorado Mountains River Basin weather. Sorry, my agenda is now cut off.
Is Abba online?
Yeah,
There he is. Abba,
Yes.
that's you. You're up.
Yeah, that's me. I'm online.
And we can see your
Right.
presentation.
Or is it full screen?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, good. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, the honorable city council members and staff. I am Abba Ahmed, Water Resource Project Manager, Aurora Water here at the Rocky Ford office. I'm before you today to seek 25,000 approval or no objection for partnership funding for the cloud seeding project. The cloud seeding, as the name implies, basically, although some people, when they had cloud seeding, they think we're doing something criminal. But as the name implies, it's just nothing but, aiding precipitation or aiding snow formation. And to do that, we do it for a purpose. And the main purpose is to increase the snowfall in the early season and the overall snowpack for the entire winter season. Cloud seeding can increase storm usually between and up to about 15%. And a lot of times during the spring and summer, we end up getting an increase in associated stream flows by up to about 5%. The 2023-24, that is the last year's program, we came up with about 80 to 90,000 acre feet of water that is gained, and approximately that will be enough water to serve about 160 households on average per year. There is cloud seeding has been going on in Colorado for many years, and started actually in the 60s. And there are 7 permitted, used to be 6. There were 6 permitted programs, but now it's 7 with the addition of St. Vrain and the Left-Hand Water Conservancy. And we all know the reason why this is done. We have, with the climate change and drought, the water both in Colorado Basin and the Arkansas Basin to a large extent is not enough. So we need to find a way to augment it. Although water managers in the state have tried to come up with many different ways of saving water through conservation and many other things. However, this particular project, what it does is actually augment the snowpack that we have and eventually the water. Now, this project is not only done in Colorado, it goes all the way down to California, the lower states, the lower basin. So each utility, each institution is contributing a certain amount of money for the success of this program. How do we do it? Well, it's really very easy. There are 3 ways of doing it. One is expensive, which is using the aeroplane when the weather is right, so that we can dissipate the silver iodide that forms a nuclei that these particles would adhere to and form the snow and precipitate with the weights and cascade down by gravity. However, here under this program, the CCMB, we don't use the aeroplane, but we have 2 methods, 2 generators type. One is automatic generating type, which is most efficient but expensive. The other one is the manual generating type. So we have about 23 of the manual generators, and we have to hire people seasonally whenever the condition is right to go and get it to start. For the manual ones, we can operate it even with our cell phones, but we have 5 of those. 3 are not working at the moment, but 2 are working well. So what we do is we hired 2 companies. The first company is Western Weather Consult and the North American Weather Consult. So they monitor the weather and tell us when is the right time to actually seed the cloud. The cloud seeding and this CCMRB program, it's actually taking place in this bluish area in the map. And that is our target area. And it's about 8,500 feet and above that you find in Pitkin, Eagle, Summit, and Grant counties. Here are the 2 methods that we use. One is the one on the left is the automatic generator, and the one on the right is the manual generator that we use. Now, part of this program is to phase out the manual generating system slowly, but it's really expensive. But another thing is because the program is not universally accepted and universally done in the United States, we have only one company that is manufacturing these generators at the moment. Now, another thing to add to that is the cost. 4 years back, the amount of money that we are contributing has almost doubled today. And that is because of the inflation and many other things that are going on. So there's rumors around that by next year, even the contribution is going to go up by at least 5,000. So instead of 25,000, may end up becoming 30,000. Now, the cost share. One of the things about this program is CWCB has already taken the bulk of the program. So CWCB is contributing about 53% of the total cost, which is about $231,750. And then we have all the front range partners that are contributing, per institution differently based on what they can afford. However, Aurora is actually contributing $25,000 for this. And collectively, that amounts to about 47% of the total sum. And this, what we are contributing and what CWCB is contributing amounts to about $450,000. And that usually does about 3,117 hours of seeding. A lot of times, questions have come up about the efficacy of this program, and then environmental actors have also questioned, the effect. More often than not, there's been studies since the 60s on this and the side effect that comes along with silver iodide. But there's nothing to show that silver iodide has any effect either on the soil or it has effect on streams, rivers, planktons, phytoplanktons, or any fishes, amphibians in the river. There's been a question also that came up, why don't we do this during the spring or summer? Now, that's a big question because this is just the winter program. And the reason is, a lot of times during the summer and winter, that is when our farmers and irrigators irrigate their lands and crops. So we may end up with flooding, and not only flooding, but hailstorm can damage almost all the crops that they are. Recently, there's been in the news flooding in a place called Dubai, where they participate in the summer program of cloud seeding. Yes, they got the water, but they were flooded. Unfortunately, they don't grow their crops, they import crops, so they can do that. And then most of their soil is sandy. The water can actually seep down and percolate within a shortest period of time. So in a nutshell, I am here asking the council to approve or give no objection to Aurora's contribution to the $25,000 for this program. And I'm open to any questions.
Thank you, Abba. It's the contract is an IGA, so it will come to you all for approval. So the request here is to move it to council because it's, as you can see, numerous governmental entities, and that's why even though it's a small amount of money from us, you guys get to approve it at full council.
All right, thank you so much for the presentation. I guess I do have a question. Obviously, the costs of everything are escalating. I didn't see the new partner, St. Vrain and Left Hand, included in the cost breakdown. Are they just included through the larger organization, or how does that work in terms of their contribution to the program?
Great question. St. Vrain have their own system in the north, spearheaded by Boulder County. So they are not part of the front range. So the reason why I added them was to show you the extent of cloud seeding within Colorado.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for
You're welcome.
clarifying that. Are there any other questions? Councilmember Bergan?
Yes, I have one.
Okay,
you
go ahead.
mentioned- Yeah, thank you. You mentioned that 3 of the generators of the 5 are not working, but then I got confused because there's 23 manual, 2 remote, but 3 are not working.
Yes, thank you.
Thank
Thank you for that question. Well, the reason why I didn't say 5 remote is because the 3 are not working and we are trying to get them to work. So they are out of service. That's why we don't include them.
Oh, so the 3 that are not working are remote generators?
Yes, the 3 are remote. We have 5 remote and 23 non-remote
Ah,
manual. Yeah.
and you said the remote ones are much more expensive?
Yes, they are much more expensive, but much more efficient.
Right.
Because we don't need to walk over there to start them. We can just start them even with our phones. The moment we get the notice that the environment and the temperature is right, we can start them using our phones.
Okay. Are there plans to add more of the remote? If we're investing as a whole over 400,000, do they have plans in their, like, I don't know if they have a capital project plan or whatever to, eventually just keep adding more of the remote generators?
That is the plan. We want at least in the next couple of years to have all 25 or 30 to be remote.
And do you have any idea how much a remote generator costs?
At the moment, no, but I can get that for you.
I was just wondering if we could apply for a grant, for, to get some more of the remote generators. Obviously, the case would be made, that they're much more efficient and would help, the program.
Yeah, that's a great point. We already saw that idea to CWCB and they are working on it. However, once it came up the table, then we will need to back them up and see how we can help them in doing this.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Am I looking at him over here?
Yes.
Yes. you are.
Okay. Oh.
Behind you there.
Behind me? Oh, gotcha. Okay, that's so bizarre. Okay.
Yeah. But that's how he can see
He
you.
can see me this way, but I have to look this way to see you.
Yeah. So with the issue, in addition, sorry, before I go, the amount of water that we get after the snow melt is usually not constant. Some years, like the previous 2 years, we have much more than 80 to 90,000 acre feet. So it all depends on the weather and the climate change. What we do is just to help nature give us more snow, and then in the end, we get more water. And it's a collective thing. Everybody, all the states from the upper all the way to the lower basin are participating. And especially for us, Aurora, we have our water coming, 50% of it coming from both Arkansas River Basin and the Colorado River Basin. So all these things are part and parcel of the benefits that we get out of it.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. And obviously it is, a relatively small contribution to
It
be
is.
able to make that happen. So,
It is.
Councilmember Medina, do you have any questions?
Gonna fall on the same lines as Councilmember Bergan is, do you have an idea of, like, since these 23, I'm sure they're scattered all over different locations, correct?
Yes.
So I just like to know, like, is it one person that does that? Is multiple people that do that? I would just like to see what the cost is to have however many people it is to crank those all up and see what that comparison is with the cost of a new one.
That's a great question. A great question. So what we do is we liaise with farmers and ranchers in the various locations where we put down our generators and we teach them how to operate the generator. So if there's need, when the temperature or the enabling environment is there, what we need to do is to call them on the phone and say, hey, at so time, go ahead and start that generators.
Okay.
Now, that's a headache. And sometimes these farmers will want to go out with their families. And so we have to do it ourselves in those, or we miss that opportunity. And that's the reason why we're heading towards the remote generators. And over time, I'm hoping that, because we're not going to stop this. This is just one simple way of getting, for lack of a better word, cheap water.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. So without any further questions, does anyone object to moving this forward to city council? All right, seeing no objection, we will go ahead and move this forward to the next city council meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, and our next item is the joint wet weather and discharge permit activities intergovernmental agreement with Jessica LaPierre.
Thank you. I believe you guys have a copy of the agreement in your packet, but this is a reoccurring agreement. It happens every year. It's been in place since 1993. The purpose of this agreement is to work with Mile High Flood District in coordination with the city of Lakewood, city of Aurora, ourselves, and the city of Denver in addressing our shared phase 1 MS4 permit requirement to collect stormwater quality data in stream. We do this through the wet weather monitoring program, where we go out and monitor at different sampling stations. The financial commitment for this agreement each year is $29,000. 20% of that is what Aurora is contributing. So the total cost of this entire agreement is $145,000. So we are only contributing 20% of that. Mile High Flood District is contributing 33%, Denver is contributing 30%, and Lakewood 17%. And these financial percentages were established in 1998 and have not changed since. So the request for us today is to approve this item and move it forward to the regular meeting. Is there any questions that I can help answer to?
Does anybody have any questions?
I don't.
None for me.
All right, none from me either. Does everyone approve moving this, or is there any objection to moving this forward to full council?
Go ahead, move it.
All right, seeing none, we will go ahead and move this forward to the full council. All right, so our next item, sorry, having the agenda move a little slow again, is Fourth Amendment to the drainage and flood control improvements for Cherry Creek restoration at Arapahoe Road. Sam Scorza.
Yes, thank you. Good morning. It looks like my screen share is booting up. And we should be, oh, it's full screen. Great. Good morning, everybody. My name is Sam Scorza. This is the Fourth Amendment to drainage improvements at Cherry Creek and Arapahoe Road. So it's likely that the three council members here have seen this before. To go through the high level overview again, there is a section of Cherry Creek that runs through 3 different jurisdictions as shown on the map. And it's experiencing an increase in sediment movement and deposition through this area, a lot of erosion. And we, for the last 3 years, the last 3 amendments, have been looking into ways to mitigate that. At the time that this project was discovered in 2004, only upstream of this area had improvements made since then. And so this being the most downstream puzzle piece to fit into that larger restoration work is being tackled now. And let's move slide. There we go. When we had started this project a few years ago, Aurora was able to financially contribute a little more than our funding partners for whom this stream bobs and weaves in and out of their jurisdictions. And so for this amendment, the other jurisdictions, primarily SEMSWA and the Water Quality Basin Authority, are increasing their funds to more equitably match a third, and Mile High Flood District covering, oh, I'm sorry. Mile High is about a half, and the rest of the half is split into thirds between us, SEMSWA and Cherry Creek Water Quality Basin Authority. We're sitting pretty much right there at 20% as of this amendment. So this Fourth Amendment requires no funding from Aurora Water, but as it is an IGA, we do need to take it to regular council to agree to other partners' funding matches. And with that, the question is this water policy supportive of moving this IGA to a regular council meeting? I'd be happy to answer any questions.
All right, I do not have any questions. It's great to see that that other folks are able to come in and fill in where we stood up a little more earlier on. Are there any questions, Councilmember Bergan?
Just how did we end up in that situation where we were paying a greater share?
We requested this project.
Oh.
And so we had it in our 5-year CIP before the others did. And so they've been catching up.
Thank you.
No questions.
Councilmember Medina?
No
Okay.
questions.
All right, seeing no further questions, does everyone support moving this forward to a regular council meeting?
Good.
Thank you.
All right, so we will go ahead and move this forward to City Council. Item number 6, East Cherry Creek Valley Master Sewage Intergovernmental Agreement with James D. Herrera.
Morning, council members and staff. Just a moment to pull up the presentation here. My name is James D. Herr, Manager of Planning Services here at Aurora Water, and I have actually 2 items on the agenda that I'm going to present together today because they're very closely interconnected. Agenda item number 6 is the East Cherry Creek Valley Master Sewer Agreement, MSA, and then agenda item number 7 is the Kings Point Intergovernmental Agreement, the amended and restated IGA. And these are with Cherry Creek Valley Water and Sanitation District, also referred to as ECCV or the district. So a lot of alphabet soup thrown at you this morning. So I wanted to begin with a little bit of history and background here. So on this exhibit on the screen, you can kind of see Aurora Reservoir and Quincy Reservoir to kind of get your bearings. Obviously, those are both within the city of Aurora and Aurora Water Service area boundary. However, you've probably seen on maps, there's this kind of gap between the other part of Aurora and then kind of the rest of Ward 6 and the south and small area.
We're so
We're
separate.
separate, right? You have to go by Quincy Reservoir and then by Aurora Reservoir. So that area that's kind of shaded in that white background at the orange outline is ECCV's service area boundary. So they provide water and sanitary sewer service to those customers. And also on this exhibit, the colored lines represent the large diameter sewer lines or interceptors. And as you all likely know, we like to convey wastewater via gravity whenever possible, as opposed to pumping. It's more reliable, it's less risky and more cost efficient. So you can kind of see the way that those interceptors are flowing there, kind of from southwest to northeast or southeast to northwest. Naturally, the drainage patterns want to go that direction. So there's a lot of opportunities to kind of send either wastewater flows from our service area boundary through their pipelines, and then their wastewater flows through our pipelines. And sometimes it goes back and forth, always to them and then back to us. So we've been partnering with ECCV for over 50 years. And during that time, there's been greater than 20 agreements put in place to address new situations that have arose over that time frame, and amendments to those. And as you might imagine, it's become pretty cumbersome to make sure that both parties are adhering to all the terms, making sure we're doing what we're supposed to, they're doing what they're supposed to. So because of that, several years ago, actually, we set out with the goal of creating a new master sewer agreement, an MSA. And some of the main goals of this MSA that we set out to accomplish was to supersede all previous sanitary sewer agreements. So they were all reviewed, any notable items we wanted to consider in the development of this MSA. Also, we wanted to provide some clarity and consistency, so update policies, some infrastructure ownership, fee structures, identify capacity and cost sharing of that capacity. In addition to contract administration, if we have to pay and they have to pay, what does that look like administratively, what are those dates? How often do we need to reconvene and make sure we are in agreement on both sides? And then also a goal of this agreement, this MSA being kind of future focused. So identifying framework for addressing situations we anticipate would be likely to come up if a pipe is over capacity or we need to expand. How are we going to jointly come together and work through that? So laying out that framework. Some notable terms within the agreement that I wanted to highlight are here. The first one being the right to retain the rights to recapture and reuse all effluent generated by the district. So this was actually some great forward thinking by some of our predecessors. I believe it was an agreement in the mid-70s that allowed us to retain that right. So one of the main goals of this agreement was to ensure that there's no language in here that would give them back that reusable effluent. So of course, we've had our attorneys and some water rights specific attorneys review that language and are comfortable with the language that's in this MSA that we will be able to retain that reusable effluent. Other notable item I wanted to highlight for you all today is the cost of service model, incorporating that to ensure appropriate costs and charges both ways. So that what we pay ECCV and what they pay us is actually the cost that we're incurring for that service. Again, as mentioned, the future kind of focus, ensuring that we have outlined a plan for how we want to work collaboratively with new situations come up that may require upsizing or expansion or rehabilitation of existing infrastructure. And lastly, there, Exhibit F of the MSA. As you might imagine, with those intertwined boundaries, there's just under 30 interconnection points where either our flow goes into their pipes or their flow comes into our pipes. And over the years, some of those have gotten a little bit messy on who owns what pipelines and where the easements are. So a lot of cleanup on those that didn't line up where it makes sense. Obviously, we want to be responsible for the pipelines that just convey our flows and they responsible for those that just convey their flows. So that's included in here in Exhibit F as well. So that is a summary of the MSA. And next I wanted to discuss the amended and restated Kings Point IGA. So a little bit of history on this one. It was back in the 2019 timeframe. The Kings Point development, now known as Prairie Point, had identified in their planning documents the need for a lift station to be able to pump their wastewater flows. And in our conversations with ECCV, we identified a pipeline that very conveniently ran right next to where this lift station would need to be. And they only had one customer on it, a school, Creekside Elementary School. So it's a great opportunity to not have a new wastewater lift station in our service area. So we worked together with ECCV to develop this IGA to allow us to use capacity in that existing 8-inch school line. And at that time, it was uncertain whether this MSA would come to fruition. So there's some language in that original IGA that was like, if then, how are we going to address this if we don't have an MSA? So the goal of this amended and restated IGA is to make the language in there consistent with the MSA and complement it. So the IGA is more addressing the interim solution, that 8-inch school line in capacity. And then the goal is to be able to refer to the MSA for that ultimate solution. So when that pipe runs out of capacity, the terms of that agreement will dictate how we can move forward. Most likely an upsizing and potentially ownership change, since it will be a large majority of basically everything but the school line would be Aurora water flows at that point in time. So that is the goal. And the plan is for this amended and restated IGA to run in parallel for review and approval by full council and become Exhibit A of the MSA. So even though it's an IGA, we're still requesting that it goes through study session, so that goes to council at the same time as well. So the question before you all today is whether you support moving this MSA and IGA to study session, ultimately to council. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
All right, Councilmember Bergan, any questions about either the MSA or IGA?
You knew I'd have one. On Prairie Point, so since they were not required to have a lift station, how does that work in terms of a developer cost? Like, because normally what they would have had to contribute to building the lift station?
Right, that would have been, since it just serves their development solely, their responsibility, of course, would be oversight and making sure that it adheres to our standards and specifications. But and in that 2019 timeframe, there was also an agreement made with a Kings Point developer, indicating that they would be responsible for the cost, the upsizing of that school line eventually. And of Bloom,
okay.
they have a metering structure, and they're responsible for building, designing, constructing that with approval from both Aurora and ECC.
Okay, and then Kings Point South, they're kind of in the process of going through planning. So once that actually gets approved and they start building, are they gonna need a lift station, or would they be able to tap into?
I
Yes.
believe, sorry.
Sorry.
I believe they're there's a basin boundary there. There's a ridge point, and I believe Kings Point South goes to the west and through. I think they may still require a lift station. I don't know if anyone else.
I think that's true. I think if I remember correctly, Kings Point South is actually divided into a couple of basins, and the west side of their property gravities to the west side of the Kings Point area. And then I think the east side of it requires a lift station, but that lift would also go to the east side of Kings Point versus either of those going to where James is talking about
Okay.
for that one pipeline. Yeah.
As you've driven on E47, you notice it's pretty hilly out there.
It has been a minute since, maybe like 5 years or so since I've seen those plans. So it could be different, but that's what I remember.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Of course.
All right, Councilmember Medina, any questions?
None for me.
Okay, and no additional questions from me, so does everyone support? Do we need to ask separately for the MSA and the IGA, or can we move both at the same time?
I think we can do both.
Whatever.
Yes, does everyone support moving both the MSA and the IGA to study session?
Good.
Okay, all right, we will go ahead and move those items forward to study session, or wait, yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, and then a Wild Horse Project history presentation from Sarah Young.
Get this shared. Great. So I think it was maybe a couple of meetings ago, Councilmember Bergan, you had asked us to provide a history of the project. So that's what the intention of this is. This is just for information. There's not an approval to move this forward. But that is what we'll go through. So and actually, it was great. This was actually a great opportunity for me to dig into history that I hadn't had a chance to really understand yet. So it was a great exercise for me as well. And then if I miss anything, obviously, Alex, feel free to chime in. So originally, Hartselle Springs Ranch, they had a large ranch in this area, and the ranch owner was who was interested in building a reservoir and looking at a partnership with a water entity potentially in order to provide water to kind of the local community, in addition to kind of leasing space and the concept or sharing space. And so this was in 2005. They had done a study. At that time, they had identified these 3 locations shown in gray. So the northern one was called Wagon Wheel. Wild Horse Reservoir was the middle one, and then Antelope Springs is the one that is on the south side. And they were a lot of how they were located was based on the ownership of the property that they had and how geographically that would work. It's interesting in that 2005 study, it makes mention of a potential partnership with the Otero pipeline. So, so I think there was a potential, thought around Aurora partnership at that time. Their alternatives or the different locations, though, it wasn't a one for one. They were looking at different sizes in different locations, kind of trying to optimize those locations. So the alternatives ranged between 11 and 41,000 acre feet. And they had assumptions in there that it could be what they termed the Homestake pipeline supply or some potential water rights from the North Fork of the South Platte River. At that time in 2005, 20 years ago, depending on which alternative and depending on how much water they were going to store at that alternative, it was between $8 and $24 million to build.
Oh my God.
No, that made me so sad.
Dang it.
I know, right? Missed opportunities. Where were we? Okay. So basically, Hartselle Springs Ranch, then we were doing some additional evaluation on the reservoir. So this is kind of the layout of what they came to a conclusion of. They hired somebody to do an additional study to say, okay, this is now the most optimum location of those three because it was the best cost on a per acre foot basis is how they kind of narrowed down their options and landed on the most cost effective was a 30,000 acre foot reservoir, which would have required the main dam, which is pretty close to where our current main dam is located, but also 3 saddle dams, as you can see there on the west side. It also, looking at some of kind of those old documents and pencil writing and those types of things, seemed to indicate that another reason that they selected this is it was the least number of additional parcels for them to purchase outside of what was already owned by Hartselle Springs Ranch. So the other thing that they had assumed is that this would not require a pump station. There was a misconception early on that the southern alternative, what we're now terming Wild Horse South Reservoir, would require a pump station. But because of the amount of pressure that's in the Otero pipeline, that is actually not the case. So in 2011 is when we kind of picked up the ball and looked at, did some modeling to try to understand the benefit for our system for additional storage in this location, pretty close to where we're already storing from Spinning Mountain Reservoir. And it just so happened that right around the time that we were looking at that Hartselle Springs Ranch filed for bankruptcy. One of the ways that they tried to get out of bankruptcy was they sold the property down at Antelope Springs. So the southern area, they had then sold that to Elk Mountain Cattle Company. And we were not aware of that. We were just starting to look at storage locations, storage in this area. And we weren't aware that sale was potentially happening, but that happened. So they bought that southern reservoir location. And then we did some additional due diligence and entered into an agreement with Hartselle Springs Ranch where we had an option to buy the property under the Wild Horse site, pending some due diligence that we were doing on geotechnical, cultural, natural resources. And we were looking at about a 40,000, we looked at a boundary to be able to buy about a 40,000 acre foot reservoir of land in terms of the purchase. So we did some pretty high level due diligence in that space. And then after that, identified that the most cost effective was a 32,000 acre foot reservoir. And at that time, it was going to be about $118 million to construct. So then we moved on to doing some additional evaluation. This, if you'll remember, is around the time that we did the first integrated water master plan. So we went forward based on our initial evaluation. We purchased the Hartselle Springs Ranch property, and then we had been identifying our need for additional storage beyond that 32,000 acre feet. And so the consultant basically said, hey, if you remember on that previous slide, it showed those 3 saddle dams, how they're shown there. The consultant basically said, if you make that a taller single saddle dam along the west side, you can store up to 96,000 acre feet on the site. We did additional modeling, and this reservoir will hopefully hold are, I have to be really careful with how I'm speaking about things now, getting ahead of the permitting process. So I'm like triggering myself in conversations with BLM. But so the 100,000 acre feet is kind of the optimum amount in terms of effectively and efficiently storing the water rights we have access to in the Colorado Arkansas. So then we're going to move forward and do some additional investigations in a little bit more detail. So as people were out there visiting the site and looking at this concept associated with the South Saddle, or with the what they call the South Saddle Dam, but it's really on the west, started noticing depressions in the topography, which is a pretty unnatural thing. And so then we went through and started analyzing the geotech in more detail and found that in the Antero Formation, which is kind of bounded between the volcanic rock that's under kind of the proposed wild horse site, is what's called evaporative bedrock, which basically means if water hits it, it disappears. And so not an ideal place to store water or build a dam, it ends up. So that was a point when we took a pretty giant step back and said, okay, we need to revisit this. So we went through a process where we looked at a number of other alternatives in the area and weren't then bounded by the Hartselle Springs Ranch land acquisition, right? We know that the location is really efficient for us because it's by the Otero pipeline. It can capture Colorado and Arc, and it's upstream of kind of gravity flowing to the city on the South Platte. So we looked in that entire area. We looked at 8 different alternatives to the wild horse site. The things that you're seeing in red are things that we considered fatal flaws in that evaluation. So the meeting that GNO stands for our goal and objective, and that goal and objective is storage in this location for approximately 100,000 or the 93,000 acre feet. So alternative 1 and 8 were eliminated because you couldn't effectively store that much water. I'll come back to some of these other line items, but we considered relocating Highway 9 a fatal flaw, and they're a fatal flaw for alternatives 6 and 8. 8 also couldn't store it, but for alternative 6, we considered that. County Road 53 is much more manageable and feasible from a permitting perspective. We're looking at all of these things from what are we going to run into from a permitting perspective when we're evaluating this. So we considered moving Highway 9 as a fatal flaw. And then
Highway 53 be in this?
County Road 53?
Or county.
So County Road 53 currently, actually, I can go back to, we'll
go there later, probably.
I think we go there later. I'll show you though. It has to be relocated around the reservoir for the current proposed site, and it would have to be relocated for Wild Horse South. It basically runs straight through the middle of both those projects. Yeah. So, and then we also, a fatal flaw we assumed was jurisdictional wetlands. We've talked a bit about how BLM is our lead agency, which is very unique, right? Because in most cases, there are jurisdictional wetlands on a water project site, right? Most of them are on channel or in some way have jurisdictional wetlands. In that instance, the Army Corps of Engineers is then the lead agency, and they are required to follow what is called LEDPA, which is the least environmentally damaging proposed alternative. So it's basically like environment, the least impactful environment, regardless of some of the other implications, is the kind of the letter of the law. What it also does is Corps of Engineers is the lead agency. It also brings EPA in as a legal authority in the project. And that's a little bit what Denver Water is dealing with Gross right now. So we considered that a fatal flaw from the perspective of a less complicated permitting process. And then the other things that we went through and considered, we went through and said, is there any possibility that there's a location up here that doesn't have any BLM surface rights on it, that doesn't have any BLM mineral estates? Because theoretically, if that were the case, we wouldn't require an EIS or a NEPA because there's no federal nexus. So Unfortunately, that didn't happen, but because federal mineral estates are sprinkled all over South Park. They're all over the place. So we unfortunately couldn't find one of those, but it was also important for us to consider how many additional parcels would need to be purchased, and surface area from like an evaporation perspective. And then the cost estimates that were provided to us at the time basically showed now we're kind of down to Wild Horse, Alternative 2 and Alternative 5, basically said, that the Wild Horse would be about the same cost as these other two sites. And so when you look at this summary, it's like we bought the property. It makes sense for us to continue to move forward with Wild Horse or with the Wild Horse site. So that is what we did. So we brought on a consultant who is a design engineer. So Tetra Tech, this is when we brought Tetra Tech on, where they specialize in dam and reservoir construction. And especially considering kind of some of the interesting geology that is going on down the south, you want to have the best people at the table making sure that we're avoiding that. So that is what we did. We also brought on our principal engineer, John Clark, who worked at Fish and Wildlife Service inspecting dams. He's been in the dam industry for like 30 years as an internal person to be able to really understand and represent our interests. So we basically said, we would like to build 96,000 acre feet on this existing site. How will we do that? They did an extensive amount of geotechnical work in this area to locate what is now known as this West Dam. So this dam that is along the south side. So instead of having that really long saddle dam, now we're basically capturing the water and kind of completing the bowl with that West Dam. That brings us on the north side of that Agate Creek diversion and outside of the Tallahassee kind of boundary and fully into the volcanics. The cost that was provided a number of years ago, or year or two ago, for this was between $600 and $800 million, and that was the engineer's estimate that was provided. So here's the kind of the configuration of what it looks like after that. Let's see. Oh, one bounces. Neat. I don't know how that happened. So kind of now back to where we have been for permitting. That's how the design kind of came to be where it is. NEPA, so in 2020, we submitted the initial application to the Bureau of Land Management, knowing that they are our lead agency. And kind of as we were talking about before, the Corps of Engineers are really the ones who are used to dealing with this type of project. This is a very unique project for BLM to be the lead on, just because of the configuration, how we happen to be off channel. And they don't, and I should also mention the NEPA regulations that changed a couple of years ago. They have the whole 2-year time frame that they put in place. What they also did is allowed federal agencies to hire third parties to represent them on their behalf. So all of that timing actually worked out pretty well, because instead of BLM having to hire a lot of resources internally to handle this, they hired one project manager. It took them a while to find that person. And then that's when we went into the agreement with them in 2022. We fund that person's position, which at this point in time is a very good thing. And then in 2023, went through a process to identify that third party, the consultant, the people who will help represent the BLM in this process. And then over the last year and a half, 2 years-ish now, but the end of 2023 and 2024, some very important but heavy lift things have been happening. So this image that I'm showing over here is a graphic representation of our water system model. And one of the first steps was to work with BLM and their third-party team to see if we would be allowed to use our water system model for this project, or if they were going to make us build an entirely new water system model that they were involved in developing, so they felt comfortable that it was showing and representing what it is. Because again, just as a reminder, if they were to authorize this project and somebody is to sue, they will sue the BLM. They don't sue us. So BLM looks at this from a very risk-adverse perspective. we had great news that happened in 2023 where the third-party team confirmed that we are allowed to use this model. That in and of itself actually saved time. And then the other major things that were happening last year is the goal and objective when I was talking about that 93,000 acre feet or the about 100,000 acre feet, that statement is basically saying we have this need and we can justify every little single component of why we need this, and we can model to demonstrate that here's how it would work. And so developing kind of the goal and objective is foundational for everything else that we do. It's basically and it's the part that everybody tries to tear apart when they're challenging your project. So we spent a lot of time putting that together, revisiting it again and again. And then we had it done. And then the gross reservoir, the first part of the gross reservoir thing happened. And part of the issue that the judge found with that was they had too narrow of a goal and objective and too narrow of alternatives. So we revisited it again and changed it some, but we still have a very robust purpose here. Then you go through a process of identifying all the alternatives, because again, the other part of NEPA is that you have to be able to say, here's the need we have, here's how we're proposing meeting that need, and we've evaluated all these other ways to do it, and this is the least impactful way for us to do it, is the gist. And so going through all of the alternatives selection, identifying those, and the screening report anyway. So we went through that for a long time, which took a lot. Okay. And so then this piece, so now we have about 11,000 lineal feet of dam on this project, which is a ton of material if you can imagine. So the most cost-effective way to build a dam, you have three options in some cases. So you can build it with, like the main dam, you can build with concrete because it's little and narrow and kind of where it's located. You can build it with earth fill, so basically dirt and rocks on the end, or you can build it with rock. The cheapest way to do that if you have a close material source is rock. Yeah. And so the team started looking for sources of rock. And so this kind of the gray triangular area there on the west side is what we are terming the West Quarry. That was then brought into the project because it would be the cheapest way to build it. And it just so happens that that is a very culturally significant location. So after having known that BLM has data associated with all of these things, it kind of opened up thoughts about other alternatives that would need to be included. So we had proposed Spinning Mountain enlargement in our alternatives. We had a proposed, and we had dozens of alternatives. We had proposed Wild Horse plus aquifer storage. What we hadn't proposed was Wild Horse South Reservoir, but they wanted to loop it in, and it's a completely viable and it's a good alternative to loop into.
Is that the one that's owned by Elk Ranch?
It's the one that is owned by Elk Mountain Cattle Company, and Elk Mountain Cattle Company actually owns other ranch property in this area. I think they potentially bought the majority of Hartselle Springs Ranch. So we have been working very closely with Elk Mountain Cattle Company for a number of years. So yes, we're working with them for that reason too. Let's see. What did I do here? Okay, so then here's just a look at that. So Wild Horse kind of being in the middle, Spinning Mountain enlargement, and then down south, Wild Horse South Reservoir. So these are the alternatives in Park County that we're evaluating right now. ASR is close to us. It's aquifer storage and recovery, kind of down by the treatment plants. And we'll talk about that later in time when we get to no action. But one other thing that we wanted to mention here, and I think Marshall has maybe mentioned this to each of you, is that part of us doing this alternative analysis, we not only have to do basically a 15% design to understand what the impact area is, but we also have to go survey for similar things, right? We need to go survey cultural, we need to go survey so that they can do that alternatives analysis comparison, which is really the point of MIPA. So in order to do that, we had about 300 property owners, I will say, in kind of between Wild Horse South Reservoir and Spinney Mountain Enlargement. For the most part, Spinney Mountain Enlargement property is owned by other agencies. But we did want to send out communications partially because we need access to some of their properties. We have to survey 15% of the impacted areas, but also partially because they're going to see people out there in these different locations and they're going to wonder what's going on. And so we have a media release. Shawnee's team has been fabulous. We've got a media release that is happening up there to kind of get them up to speed. Through the new county manager, who's also fantastic. He's been keeping the commissioners up there informed. And then we have specific letters going out to just over 300 property owners that just went out yesterday, actually. So, or what is today? Monday. Yeah, Wednesday. Yeah, and then our website has now been updated with us. So, so that's where we're at right now. And I think that gets us kind of current. We have a 24-page P6 schedule right now, which is an outline schedule of all of the things that need to happen ahead of the notice of intent. So when the actual BLM permitting process starts formally. So that's what that thing is, kind of early. We're working very hard to keep a January 2026 deadline on that. We would anticipate a record of decision after they go through public scoping, the EIS process, hopefully in 2028. And then we would hope to be able to start construction in the middle of 2028. So that's currently where we're at. I'm sure there are questions, but I'm glad you asked the question. It was helpful for me to understand that history, and that's where we are.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, please go ahead and feel free to dialogue.
So the fact that all this work has been done, the modeling, everything, all these different options over all these years, we can't just present that. The one we've been proposing, Wild Horse North, whatever you call it now, has pretty much met all the requirements. Like I guess it makes me crazy that they're making us do another study to look at another reservoir what is wrong with this one? Like, have they said anything
the
wrong?
reality is that the NEPA process itself, which is that comparison of resources between the selected alternatives, hasn't started. So the information that we're going out and collecting is basically saying, here's the baseline data. So like, as an example, Wild Horse South, we just as one example, so the Wild Horse site, there are a couple of golden eagle nests, and there's mountain plover, which is a bird that is, of concern, right? And then on Wild Horse South, when they go out and do environmental comparisons, if they don't find either of those things, or they find a different endangered species, right, then they would be able to compare those things to each other to say which one is least impactful. Now, that's one example of one piece of environmental, and there are 25 different resources that they have to evaluate between these things. So like wetlands, as an example, like the Spinney project will have a huge inundation of wetlands. But what we don't know is, comparatively, as an example, cultural, like, is this site so much more impactful on cultural that they would then recommend the Wild Horse South Reservoir location because it would be less impactful in that resource. But again, there's 25 different things that they're looking at to evaluate and say they do or do not approve access to their land based on that evaluation. And the BLM can't make that decision on their own. So public scoping is basically saying to the public, what do you think we should evaluate in this process? And then the draft or the EIS process basically says, okay, here's all the information about the impact differences between these. and those are on-site differences. Those also include differences in terms of stream flow and how those impact, fish and water quality and so many things that people care a lot about in the state. And so, so the EIS basically presents all that information to say, here are the differences in the alternatives. And then they get the feedback and then they say, yes, we're approving this, or we're not approving this, but we would improve this instead because we think it's the least impactful. So it's why these projects take so long, because it's so much data that has to be generated for them to be able to make that decision and for it to be defensible. At the end of the day, right, like we want it to be defensible as much as they do, because we need to build a project there, right? So, and we, to maintain our level of service, we need this to be in place by 2045. So it's going to take some time, but we're trying very hard to make sure it's worth it.
So did we learn anything that we should have done sooner so that we didn't end up in this situation? Like, could we have, when we had the consultant doing all the studies about the 96, acre feet reservoir versus whatever different footprints or whatever, could we have had this happen without having to consider this other reservoir?
Well, through that process, like those initial kind of evaluations that we were doing that were environmental, geotechnical, we always had sight on this, right? To be able to think of the big hurdles we're going to run around or run across in this really complicated process. I think if there were something that maybe we could have done differently, it would have been doing the entire, so what we've kind of been doing with the BLM, and it can work both ways. But what's happening right now is we've been kind of piecemealing the package of information and having a very collaborative relationship with the BLM and with the cooperating agencies on methodologies, data, information that's presented, how it's presented. Another way that could be done, and I don't know that it's better or worse, but another way that it could be done is you have an RFP that you put out that brings all of the technical experts together that we have now and develop one massive package of information and then submit that over to the BLM and third party for them to run through all of it and then do a little bit of back and forth. I don't know that would have saved time. I think,
but when we evaluated all those alternatives and we didn't evaluate south, we took on that responsibility of doing all those, all that examination of those different alternatives.
Right.
But had we done an RFP, wouldn't we have other people just simultaneously doing, instead of us doing one evaluation, then have to do another evaluation? Could they have not been done simultaneously?
Yeah, you could. It's a massive amount of work.
Oh.
It's what's taking us approximately 2 years is to put that amount of information together for a single site. But that is a kind of what we're trying to do. And I guess it should have been the alternatives that we looked at. One of the other two alternatives that I think it was alternative number 2 or alternative number 5 was Wild Horse South Reservoir.
Okay, but that was proven to not be a good alternative.
Well, the reason that it was excluded at the time is because what was presented to us is that the cost was about the same, and we already owned the property for the main Wild Horse site.
Oh, it was just that factor, not.
There was nothing wrong with it.
Oh.
Except for the fact that we had already done so much work on this other site, and it, again, was presented to be about the same cost. Yeah. So.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's where we've been, and that's, and we have, I think we maybe included it in your packet this month. Casey is the quarterly update. So we will continue to do that in kind of that just provides updates in terms of where things are at. But we, we're trying very hard to put a package together that stands up in court is what we're up to.
Well, I will be off council by the time we even get a decision.
You can still come.
No,
look at
can I
it.
see
Yeah.
I still get
Water
invited?
policy committee.
Of course.
Any other
Yeah. Any questions, Councilmember Medina?
None for me. Learned a lot.
Does your head hurt?
So I guess my one question is, we know we need this by 2045. Other than obviously the continuously escalating costs, are there any other benefits to making sure it gets done as soon as possible?
You hit on the main one, honestly, and I think there's also what's interesting with NEPA, as we've seen even in this last number of months, is that it's pretty hard to move things forward when the game board keeps changing, right? So I think the other big driver for us is trying to get the approval process done within a single administration if possible.
Oh, one more.
Yes, please go ahead.
So had this been able to move forward, whatever, 5 years ago, 4 years ago, the cost from then to what we're anticipating, do we know that difference?
Yeah, so.
Because that should be us like thrown in their face.
Yeah,
Waste
I'm not
of
sure
money.
whose face to throw it in, but but yeah, it's, so one of the reasons that we brought CMGC on is because of the market volatility over the last number of years. Our engineers just didn't have the right information to be able to cost predict things well. And historically, we've been anticipating a 3 or 5% increase in terms of ENR costs. The last few, it's been in the double digits. And so I will mention we're over $1 billion for the Wild Horse project now. And the cost escalation that we're assuming annually is about 5%. So it's a real number, and another reason why we're extraordinarily motivated to move it forward as quickly as we can, even though we don't need it until 2045. Yeah. I'm sorry, Councilmember Coombs, did that answer your question?
Yes. Are there any further questions?
None.
Okay, well, thank you, Sarah, for that very comprehensive presentation.
One day
Now
I'll
do we have,
truncate it.
sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I said one day I'll get it right and I'll start truncating things, but you got the long version.
It's interesting.
No, it was really helpful. Thank you.
Sure.
All right, do we have any miscellaneous matters for consideration?
Did we do a WISE presentation? Am I losing my mind? Did we do a WISE presentation?
We did that. It actually went to council, the WISE WDA.
It did, okay.
Went to council last week and is up for reconsideration next week, and then we'll pass it around for signatures. But you're probably thinking that because it's taken us so long. We always talk about WISE, but soon we won't have to.
Yes, which is exciting. Okay, so anything else, Councilmember Bergan or Councilmember Medina?
None for me.
I guess we'll just get updates on where we are with Niagara Bottling Company.
Yeah, the letter.
Yeah,
Out last
this went
week,
out.
so as we hear, we'll give you guys updates. But as far as I know, we haven't heard anything back yet.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
What?
Okay, well, we'll look forward to that information, and whatever that response ends up being. And then our next meeting, I just need to pull up my calendar. Unless someone has the date off the top
It's the 21st.
of May.
Yes.
Okay. Any conflicts with May 21st?
None.
All right, seeing none, that will be the date for our next meeting. And we'll look forward to everything you all have to bring to us at that time. And with all of that covered, we'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting. So have a great rest of your week, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.